A powerful strike against Russian air defense in Crimea. Ukraine's Special Operations Forces showed how drones destroyed a launcher of the S-400 Triumph surface-to-air missile system and an ammunition depot of Russia's 18th Army. The special operation was carried out by the resistance movement of the Special Operations Forces in cooperation with the deep strike units back on October 6th, but the information was made public only now for security reasons. An air defense facility used by the occupiers to launch strikes against Ukraine was hit near Yevpatoria in the village of Uyutne. On the same day, a Special Operations Forces drone destroyed an ammunition depot near Simferopol, the location of which was obtained by members of the resistance movement. I will discuss the situation in the Black Sea as well as in Crimea with Dmytro Pletenchuk, spokesperson for the Naval Forces. Mr. Dmytro, greetings to you. Good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Alexei. Greetings to the studio and the viewers.
So, the successful strike on the S-400 in temporarily occupied Crimea seems to continue your point from October 31st. Let me remind you about the systematic disabling of Russian air defense systems. Can we now say that the air defense fuss in Crimea, there have now appeared, let's call them corridors or gaps, large enough to allow Ukrainian UAVs and missiles to operate more safely, not only against targets in Crimea, but also against other enemy assets, let's say in the waters and coastal areas of the Black Sea?
Mr. Alexei, it's important to understand that this is a continuous process and there is a kind of ongoing interaction, so to speak. We take something out, they restore it. At that moment, there is a certain time lag to take action. Again, for example, at the bases. In situations where the enemy keeps these systems specifically for concealed deployment, if they are detected and are within reach, they can also be targeted. Why not? In any case, this action reduces our enemy's potential, particularly in terms of their capabilities. It's important to understand that all such systems are similar. They're not exactly custom-made products, but they are still quite complex from a technical standpoint. This equipment is something that takes a long time to produce and is quite difficult to repair. Any such system, especially the 6400, is no longer from the Soviet S-300 stockpiles. These are the ones that were produced later. So yes, it's quite an interesting target. If you take, for example, the old launchers, yes, a lot of those were produced back in the day, but these are newer ones.
Mr. Dmytro, there's also some information, if you can confirm it, of course. On November 3rd, I found a news report that in Sukarna Bay, in temporarily occupied Sevastopol, a ship of the Russian Black Sea Fleet, the Albatros M, burned down. At least that's according to the Telegram channel Crimean Wind. And can you tell us more about this fire?
The thing is, I can't confirm this yet, although this Telegram channel, in principle, in my opinion, it's generally trustworthy, at least in most cases. And here it's important to understand that what is or was stationed in Crimea is not considered a top priority target, because for the most part, the combat units remaining there are either decommissioned, damaged, or not combat ready. For example, they're not outdated or written off, but they're not combat ready. We can take the medium reconnaissance ship Ivan Kurs as an example. And after the damage it sustained together with the large landing ships during the trial run, it has remained there ever since. Of course, they might move them around the bay to protect them from further strikes. But these are definitely not the highest priority targets to spend scarce missiles on. Expensive munitions for them. So to say that this could somehow significantly affect the current balance of power, I definitely can't say that. In Crimea, as of now, only patrol boats are actually going out to sea. These are small individual vessels, basically copies of our SB-90S, like an SB-90 for smokers. And their main function, of course, is there. Guarding the entrances to the base, to the bay, anti-sabotage operations, and sometimes they might conduct mine countermeasures. But in reality, such cases don't affect us in any significant way right now.
Mr. Dmytro, I have another question. The thing is, according to reports from the Air Force of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, during the massive combined attack on the night before Saturday, November 8th, the enemy used 3 Caliber missiles from the waters of the Black Sea. There were 2 pauses in the use of these missiles. We remember, and perhaps I'll remind the viewers, from the fall of 2023 until March of this year. That was a long pause, and a short one from March to October of this year already. First of all, why are there such pauses? Is this related to the technical and operational capabilities of the Russians? And what has changed now that they actually launched 3 caliber missiles?
Honestly, I didn't notice any pauses. There haven't been any mass attacks for a long time, but in general, they've been launching them regularly twice a month, previously once a month. Only June, as far as I remember, was unusually active for them. Otherwise, last month, there were launches at the beginning and end of the month, and this month, in fact, the first launch happened in the first 10 days. This is more interesting. Another thing is, why 3? Why not 8, when there are 8 launchers on board, but only 3 were launched? Personally, I'm more interested in the number. The effectiveness of these missiles has long been far from the best, especially when compared to other means. But their peculiarity is that they're a bit easier to intercept than, for example, ballistic missiles, because the speed is completely different after all.
In this regard, I apologize, I have an additional question. The thing is, caliber missiles are often associated by Ukrainians with blackouts because from October 2022 to March 2023, during the first blackout, they actually played a key role in attacks on Ukraine's energy infrastructure. They were launched by the dozens. So isn't this, a kind of psychological game, a sort of posture from Russia's side, like, here are some calibers for you, but as you said, only 3 instead of 8? Thank God for that, of course.
Well, this could be due to a variety of different reasons, each of which may play a significant role. Knowing our neighbor, so to speak, and understanding their mindset and approach, we have to realize that they tend to use whatever resources, tools, or equipment they have at their disposal, based on their logic and reasoning, especially when they decide to carry out a massive, large-scale attack like this most recent one. As you haven't mentioned yet, it is most likely, or at least highly probable, that having 8 carriers available, they would have used at least 2 of them in order to maximize the load and pressure on our air defense systems. This is a strategy that aligns with their usual tactics and operational patterns. If they don't do this, then accordingly they must be experiencing some difficulties. Again, based on their logic, because if you've already brought out the carrier, even if not to the sea, but to the launch position, then most likely it would be logical to use it to its full capacity. But nothing happened. This could be related to logistics if we simplify it completely, or it could be due to the inability to be based in Crimea. And these are exactly the consequences that are the result of the joint work of the armed forces of Ukraine. As for pushing the Russian fleet out of the bays of temporarily occupied Crimea, there is a correlation here. We can't fully disclose it, but in any case, such a dependency exists, because the main base still remains in Crimea. And this, of course, can affect the combat capability of the so-called Russian Federation's Black Sea Fleet. I understand this refers to 2023. Back then, they were still based there, so it was easier to deploy them.
Mr. Dmytro, thank you very much for your comment, for your time, and for your service as well. This was Dmytro Pletenchuk, spokesperson for the Naval Forces of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, who was with us on the line. Thank you.